Ever feel like you're just drowning in articles, research, data, that constant stream hitting you from all sides?
Yeah, like a lot.
Today, we're going to try and cut through that noise to really understand something genuinely transformative, robotic process automation.
RPA. Yeah.
And we're going to use UiPath as our lens, to dive deep.
Absolutely. Our mission for this deep dive is, well, to unpack RPA, what it actually is, beyond just the buzzwords.
Right.
We're talking about a software program, basically, that perfectly imitates human actions to automate those repetitive, rule-based processes. Think of it as like your new digital shortcut.
A digital shortcut. I like that. So we'll explore its maybe surprising origins, how it works, why businesses are adopting it so fast, and how a powerful tool like UiPath really brings it all to life. Get ready for some, genuinely surprising insights that should leave you feeling well-informed and ready to talk about the future of automation.
Sounds good. Let's unpack this.
Okay, so when we hear robotic process automation, I think for a lot of us, our minds immediately jump to, physical robots.
Yeah.
Maybe something out of a sci-fi movie. But that's not really what we're discussing here, is it?
No, not at all. Good point. When we say robot in RPA, you should really picture a computer program, just a piece of software.
Okay.
Its core purpose is to mimic how a human interacts with computer applications. We're essentially talking about a virtual worker operating right there on your screen.
A virtual worker.
Yeah.
And what kinds of tasks are these virtual workers best suited for?
Well, they really excel at those labor-intensive, often tedious tasks. Think of anything highly repetitive and rule-based.
Like what?
Things like back-office processes, meticulous data entry, or, say, validating information across different systems. If you can write down the steps clearly, a bot can probably do it.
That sounds incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
But it also feels like, it builds on advancements we've seen before. Where does RPA fit into the sort of broader history of automation?
You're absolutely right to pick up on that. RPA is, I think, a truly game-changing technology, but it definitely stands firmly on the shoulders of several significant advancements.
Such as?
Well, for instance, we've had screen scraping software for a while now. That could scan static information to pull out key terms. RPA integrates that fundamental capability.
Right, pulling text off the screen.
Exactly. Then there are things like workflow automation and management tools. These helped streamline processes like order processing or capturing customer information, eliminating a lot of manual data entry. RPA builds on this too.
Okay. And what about artificial intelligence? That's the big one everyone talks about. How does AI fit in?
Absolutely. AI allows computer systems to perform tasks that, traditionally required human intelligence and intervention, often replacing tedious manual labor. RPA, crucially, integrates AI capabilities.
Oh, okay.
And that really extends its reach beyond just simple rules, making it even more powerful.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, it's not just about one bot doing data entry over here or another managing a workflow in isolation over there. The real, game changer here seems to be that RPA lets you stitch all of that together, almost like building a seamless, hyper-efficient digital employee from these different pieces.
That's precisely the insight, yes.
Could you give us a quick example? Something that really needs all those parts working together.
Sure. Imagine a really complex loan application process, okay? A simple workflow tool might just move the application form from step A to step B. Screen scraping might maybe pull some data from an old legacy system that doesn't have a modern API.
Right, like an old mainframe screen or something.
Exactly. But with RPA, integrating all these bits, you can have a bot read an incoming email with a scanned application using OCR, which leverages AI, by the way.
Okay, so it can read the scan.
Yes. Then it can extract specific data points from that scan, cross-reference those points with multiple, maybe disconnected internal systems, initiate a background check through another portal, update your CRM system, and even send a personalized confirmation email to the applicant, all without a human touching it.
Wow.
That level of comprehensive end-to-end automation, integrating various data sources, making decisions based on rules and maybe some AI, that's where RPA's synthesis truly shines. It brings it all together.
That example really drives home the why. And speaking of the why, what are the sort of urgent problems businesses are trying to solve right now that make RPA so appealing?
Well, think about a typical large enterprise today. Their processes are often in constant flux, right? Because of fierce competition.
Always changing.
Always changing. And many businesses are kind of stuck with multiple, often disconnected IT systems that just can't adapt quickly enough to new competitive demands. They're brittle.
And then there's the people challenge, isn't there? Every time a business process changes significantly, you either need to hire and train new employees or retrain your existing ones for completely new tasks,
Yeah.
which takes time and money.
Exactly. Both of those options are incredibly costly and time-consuming. RPA offers a different path,
Yeah.
deploying those virtual workers we talked about.
Right.
They imitate human actions, allowing for much cheaper and faster adaptation. If a process changes, you're not retraining an entire department. You're often just, adjusting a few lines of software code in the bot.
Oh,
It effectively bridges your digital workforce and your human workforce with your processes and technology, makes things more agile.
that clarity around adapting to change is really helpful. Now, there's another related term that sometimes causes confusion. Test automation.
Yeah.
How is RPA different from test automation? Because, on the surface, they might seem quite similar. Both involve automating interactions with software.
They do share some common ground, yeah, in aiming for correctness and efficiency, but their fundamental goals and methods are quite distinct. Test automation's main purpose is really to reduce the time it takes to test software for bugs, for defects.
Finding problems in the code?
Precisely. RPA's goal, on the other hand, is more about reducing manual effort and potentially headcount by automating actual business processes.
So one is about validating software. The other is about optimizing business operations.
Got it. What about coding skills? Does RPA require you to be, a programmer?
That's a key difference. Test automation typically requires coding skills to create robust test scripts. You need to know how to program.
Okay.
RPA, however, is often described as wizard-driven. It generally does not require traditional coding skills, making it much more accessible to business users, not just IT folks.
That distinction seems pretty revolutionary, doesn't it? Does that mean almost anyone in a business could potentially start building these automations? Like citizen developers? It certainly opens up possibilities for that, yes. For what's often called citizen developers, people closer to the business process can sometimes build their own automations.
Interesting. And what about what they automate and where these automations typically run?
Good question. Test automation primarily automates a product itself, testing its functionality. RPA, however, can automate products as well as services across an entire organization. It's broader in scope.
Okay.
And in terms of where they operate, test automation runs in various environments like QA, quality assurance, maybe production sometimes, or UAT, user acceptance testing. RPA usually runs only on production environments because it's directly impacting live business operations.
Right. It's doing the actual work.
It's doing the actual work.
So we're talking about different tools for different audiences and different phases of a business life cycle. Could you give us some quick, concrete examples just to nail down the difference?
Absolutely. For test automation, think about automatically running a suite of checks after a software update to make sure nothing broke. Regression testing.
Right.
For RPA, it's about processes like, say, automatically onboarding a new customer, gathering their details from a form, setting up their accounts in 3 different systems, and sending them a welcome email. Or processing a whole batch of loan applications from start to finish without manual intervention.
Okay, that makes the distinction much clearer. RPA sounds incredibly promising. But, like any powerful technology, it must have its trade-offs, right? Its downsides. What are the main advantages and limitations we should be aware of? And maybe we can tackle some common misconceptions, too.
You're right, it's definitely not a silver bullet.
Okay.
Let's start with the advantages, the pros. RPA significantly reduces human effort and, crucially, the costly errors that often come with manual tasks.
Fewer typos, fewer mistakes.
Exactly. It dramatically improves productivity, which leads to very clear cost and time savings. It can also offer real-time visibility into process bottlenecks, or even help discover bugs inadvertently.
How so?
Well, if a bot keeps failing at the same step, it might highlight an issue in the underlying application that humans were just working around.
Ah, interesting.
Plus, as we said, it's generally suitable for non-technical users, making it easier to automate a wide range of processes. And it often requires less extensive training compared to, say, learning a programming language.
Okay, those benefits are pretty compelling. What about the downsides or the limitations? Where does it struggle?
The main limitations are, firstly, that if the underlying application you're automating changes even slightly, like a button moves on a web page or a field name changes, you'll likely need to go back and reconfigure your bots. They can be brittle to UI changes.
So maintenance is a factor.
Maintenance is definitely a factor. Also, the bot's performance is inherently dependent on the speed and responsiveness of the applications it's interacting with. If the underlying system is slow, the bot will be slow too.
It can't go faster than the system it's using. Makes sense. And what about those persistent myths? Let's debunk a few. What's the first big one?
Myth number 1. RPA software requires coding skills. As we've discussed, this is generally false. A non-technical person can often use it effectively just by understanding the visual front-end interface.
Okay, myth busted. What's number 2?
Myth 2. Human supervision is not required at all. Also false. Humans are absolutely needed to program, design, manage, and oversee the tasks assigned to the bots. The bots perform the tasks, but humans are the ones guiding them, handling exceptions, and improving the processes.
They're tools, not autonomous beings.
Precisely. And finally, myth 3. RPA is only for big organizations. Again, not true. Small to medium-sized organizations can absolutely deploy RPA to automate their business processes and realize significant benefits, maybe starting smaller, but still getting value.
That's really empowering, actually, especially for smaller businesses looking to streamline operations without massive IT projects. So we've covered the why and the what. Now let's get into the how. How does RPA actually work sort of under the hood? And if a business wants to get started, what are the typical steps for a successful implementation?
Okay, so at its core, RPA bots interact with a computer system's user interface just like humans do. They literally click buttons, type text into fields, copy data, paste it elsewhere, navigate menus.
Just like you or I would use the mouse and keyboard.
Exactly. They handled those repetitive rule-based tasks without needing any complex API integrations or changes to the existing software. That's a key advantage.
So it works on top of existing systems.
Yes, it works at the presentation layer, the UI layer. The beauty is that it's generally code-free and user-friendly, working seamlessly with pretty much any existing application without needing additional, often costly software development on those underlying systems.
And if a business decides, okay, we want to implement RPA, is there a standard methodology, a kind of roadmap to follow?
There is, yes. A recommended methodology for successful RPA implementation usually looks something like this. First, you start by identifying the processes that are good candidates for automation, those highly repetitive, rule-based, high-volume ones.
Find the low-hanging fruit.
Kind of, yeah. Find the right fruit. Then, very importantly, you optimize those identified processes. Make sure they're as efficient as possible before you automate them. Don't automate a broken process.
Good point. Garbage in, garbage out faster.
Exactly. Next, you build a solid business case for your RPA journey, calculating the expected return on investment. You need that buy-in. After that, you select an RPA vendor like UiPath or others.
Do your research.
Do your research. Then you start your initial RPA bot development, maybe on a smaller scale, a pilot project. And finally, assuming success, you expand the RPA scope and continue building bots as needed, scaling up your automation efforts across the organization.
Okay, that sounds like a logical progression. Can you give us a quick practical example of how an RPA bot would actually execute a common process step by step?
Sure. Imagine this simple scenario. An RPA bot could be programmed to automatically check a specific email inbox every hour. If it finds an email from a particular sender with an attached Excel file,
Okay.
it opens the email, downloads the attachment, opens the Excel file, reads data from, say, columns B and C, then opens a web-based CRM system, logs in, searches for a customer record using the data from column B, and updates a field in that record using the data from column C, then logs out.
And it just does that automatically.
Over and over, accurately, without getting bored or making mistakes. It's a continuous automated flow, mimicking exactly what a human would do, but potentially much faster and running 24/7 if needed.
Right. Now, speaking of selecting an RPA vendor, you mentioned UiPath, but there are others like Blue Prism, Automation, Anywhere, OpenSpan, WorkFusion. What should someone consider when choosing an RPA tool? And why has UiPath become such a, well, popular player in this space?
That's a crucial decision. When choosing a tool, you should look at several things. What's the underlying technology stack? Is it compatible with your existing systems, like .NET or Java? How easily can it read and write business data from various sources? Does it have a user-friendly interface that your business users can actually grasp and maybe even use themselves?
Ease of use is key.
Definitely. Interoperability across multiple applications is also critical. Can it work seamlessly with your desktop apps, web apps, maybe even mainframe terminals or Citrix environments? You also need to assess how easy it is to manage your robots. You need centralized control and visibility, especially as you scale. Think about the types of tasks it can configure. Is it strictly rule-based, or can it incorporate more intelligence like AI or machine learning components? And of course, robust security controls are absolutely paramount. How does it handle credentials? How does it log actions?
Lots to consider. So with all those critical factors in mind, why UiPath in particular? What makes it stand out?
Well, UiPath has really established itself as a reliable, fast, and arguably one of the most popular RPA tools, particularly strong in Windows desktop automation. It was founded back in 2005, so it's been around a while.
It's mature technology.
It's mature, yeah. Its core strength, I think, lies in automating those often boring, repetitive tasks and significantly reducing human intervention, largely thanks to its very intuitive visual drag-and-drop functionality. It's really built for scale and ease of use from the ground up.
That drag-and-drop feature definitely sounds attractive, especially for non-coders. What other key features make UiPath stand out in this, frankly, crowded RPA landscape?
UiPath offers a complete integrated platform. It includes UiPath Studio for designing the automations, UiPath Orchestrator for managing and deploying them, and UiPath Robots for actually executing the tasks. They all work seamlessly together as one ecosystem.
Yeah, the whole package.
Exactly. Its interface in Studio is very intuitive, allowing for almost instinctive robot creation using those drag-and-drop activities and visual flowcharts. It also boasts an incredibly extensive activity library with hundreds, maybe thousands of pre-built actions, so you rarely have to start completely from scratch.
Saves a lot of time, presumably. And what about security and integration with other, maybe more cutting-edge tech?
Security is definitely a top priority for them. It stores and encrypts credentials centrally, typically in Orchestrator or external vaults. And for more advanced automation, UiPath supports deep third-party integration. You can easily plug in cognitive services and OCR technologies from leaders like ABBYY, IBM Watson, Google, Microsoft, usually at the API level.
So your bots can see and understand more complex things.
Precisely. They can read invoices, understand sentiment in emails, things like that. Plus, for businesses managing lots of bots, its server-based licensing through Orchestrator makes management centralized and generally quite straightforward.
That's a pretty robust set of features. Let's dig just a little deeper into those three core products you mentioned: Studio, Robot, and Orchestrator. Can you quickly recap the role each one plays within the UiPath platform?
Sure. Think of them as a well-oiled team. UiPath Studio is your design environment. It's the creative hub, the workshop. This is where you visually model your robotic processes using those recorders and the drag-and-drop components we talked about. It's where you actually build the automation logic.
So Studio is where you create the automation blueprint. What about the robot?
The UiPath Robot is the executor, the worker bee. Once you're done designing your automation in Studio and you deploy it, the robot takes over. It's the actual virtual worker that runs those processes on a machine, either attended by a human or unattended in the background, with ideally perfect accuracy, speed, and consistency 24/7 if needed.
Got it. And finally, Orchestrator. What's its specific role?
UiPath Orchestrator is essentially the brain and the control center for your entire automation operation, especially when you have multiple bots. It's a centralized, usually web-based server application. It allows you to deploy your bots to specific machines, schedule when they run, monitor their performance in real time, manage queues of work, handle credentials securely, and generally manage your entire fleet of robots and processes. It provides that essential governance and visibility across your organization.
Okay, that clarifies the roles nicely. Now, for those of us listening who might be curious about, dipping our toes in, maybe trying out UiPath Studio, what are the basic requirements and what's the general experience of using its interface?
Good question. To get started, you'll need a fairly modern Windows computer, generally Windows 7 or ideally Windows 10 or 11. And a quick but important note, there is currently no Mac version of UiPath Studio.
Windows only. Okay.
Yeah. Windows only for Studio, yes. Basic familiarity with everyday computer applications like MS Office, web browsers, that kind of thing is helpful. But again, you really don't need a formal coding background to get started.
And is the installation process complicated?
Not usually, no. It's quite straightforward, especially with the Community Edition, which is free for individuals and small businesses. You typically download it from their website, maybe fill in a few credentials, you might get an email link, run a simple executable file, adello.exe or .mai, and then activate it, often just with your email or a device ID. It's pretty smooth.
And once it's installed, UiPath Studio offers different ways to start a project.
Yes. When you open it, it usually gives you a choice of starting project types. You can start with a simple blank project to build everything from scratch. Or there are templates like simple process, agent process improvement for attended automation, and even sophisticated templates like the Robotic Enterprise Framework or RE-Framework, which provides a robust structure for large-scale transactional deployments.
So you've got options depending on what you want to build. Once you're actually in the studio, what's it like to navigate? You mentioned drag and drop.
Right. UiPath Studio's interface is really designed for visual thinkers. Imagine a main canvas area that's your designer panel. This is where you literally drag and drop actions, called activities, to build your automation workflow visually.
Okay.
On the side, usually to the left, you've got the activities panel. This contains hundreds, maybe thousands of these pre-built activities, neatly categorized things for interacting with Excel, email, web browsers, UI elements, data manipulation, everything. You just find the one you need and drag it onto your canvas.
Digital Legos, basically.
Exactly like digital Legos. That's a great analogy. You also have other important panels. The project panel shows all the files in your current automation project. The properties panel, usually on the right, lets you configure the details of whatever activity you've selected on the canvas, like telling a type into activity, what text to type and where to type it.
So you configure the details there.
Yes. And there's an output panel at the bottom that shows messages from the robot as it runs, including any errors, which is crucial for debugging. There are others too, like outline, locals for debugging, but those are the main ones you interact with constantly.
That sounds pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
Something that always fascinates me about these powerful tools is how much customization is actually possible under the hood.
Right.
Are there any, hidden gems for tailoring the experience? Maybe keyboard shortcuts to speed things up?
Oh, absolutely. Keyboard shortcuts are a huge time saver for anyone doing serious development, and UiPath Studio has a robust set. Beyond the common ones you'd expect, like Ctrl+S to save or F5 to run a workflow.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff, yeah. You've got specific gems like F9 to set a breakpoint. That pauses your automation at a specific spot when you're debugging so you can inspect what's happening. Shift plus F9 clears all the breakpoints you've set. F7 starts debug mode. Little things like that add up. And here's where it gets really interesting for power users, a real aha moment for customization. All these keyboard shortcuts are actually stored in a plain text XML file, usually called keyboardmappings.xml, in the UiPath installation folder.
You can just edit that file.
You can. You can open that file in a text editor and actually customize your own key combinations for almost any command in the Studio ribbon, like setting a specific shortcut for starting web recording or something you use frequently. It gives you incredible personalized control over your development environment if you want it.
That's a really deep level of customization. Surprising for a tool often touted for its ease of use. Okay, with the UI and efficiency tricks in mind, let's talk about actually building your first automation project and the crucial process of debugging it when things inevitably go wrong. What does a typical UiPath project look like in terms of its files and structure?
Okay. A standard UiPath project folder, when you look inside, will always contain a main.xaml file. Think of .xaml as the file format for UiPath workflows. Main.xaml is usually the primary workflow, the starting point for your automation.
The main entry point.
Exactly. You might have other .xaml files too if you break your automation down into smaller reusable components, and these would be connected or invoked from main.xaml. There might also be a screenshots folder if your automation interacts with UI elements and captures images. And importantly, there's always a project.json file.
What's in that?
The project.json file contains all the essential metadata about your project, its name, description, dependencies, like which activity packages it needs, its unique ID, things like that. It's how UiPath manages the project settings.
Got it. So how would you go about creating something really simple? Let's take that example from before. An automation that just asks for the user's name and then greets them. How would that look in Studio?
Right. Super simple example. You'd start a new blank project in Studio. Then you'd probably drag a sequence activity onto the main designer panel. A sequence is just a container for a linear flow of steps.
Step 1, step 2, step 3.
Exactly. Inside that sequence, you'd first add an input dialog activity from the activities panel. In its properties, you'd set the title to something like, please enter your name, and the label to maybe, what is your name? UiPath needs a place to store the name the user types in, so you'd create a variable, maybe called username, in the variables panel at the bottom, and tell the input dialog activity to store its result in that username variable.
Okay, so it asks and saves the answer.
Correct. Then, right after the input dialog in the sequence, you'd add a message box activity. In its properties, in the text field, you'd type the greeting. You can combine literal text with the variable, so you might type something like, welcome to MI plus username.
So it puts the name into the message.
Exactly. And that's basically it. You press F5 to run, the input box pops up, you type your name, click OK, and the message box appears with the personalized greeting. It's all visual dragging, dropping, and configuring properties. No code written.
That's a great, clear, simple example. Now, of course, automation isn't always perfect right out of the gate, especially with more complex processes. What exactly is automation debugging in this context, and how does UiPath help you find and fix those inevitable errors?
Debugging fundamentally is just the process of identifying and removing errors or bugs from your automation project. Because automations interact with live systems, things can go wrong. An application might change unexpectedly, data might be in the wrong format, a selector might not find a UI element anymore.
Things break.
Things break. UiPath's debug component is incredibly powerful for figuring out why. It essentially allows you to see exactly what your robot is doing step by step, almost like watching over its shoulder in slow motion, so you can easily spot where it might be tripping up or not behaving as you expected.
And what are some of the key tools or functions within UiPath Studio for getting that over-the-shoulder view during debugging?
There are several key ones. First, you have the validate function, often in the ribbon. This checks your entire project for obvious errors or inconsistencies before you even try to run it. Catches simple mistakes early.
Like a spell check for automation.
Kind of, yeah. Then, during execution, you can set breakpoints on specific activities. We mentioned F9 before. When the robot reaches a breakpoint, it pauses execution, letting you inspect the current state of variables in the locals panel, or see what the application screen looks like at that exact moment.
So you can freeze it and look around.
Exactly. Then you have the stepping functions. Step into, usually F11, executes the very next activity, and then pauses again, allowing you to go through your workflow one tiny step at a time, giving you really granular control. Step over, usually F10 is similar, but if the next activity is something complex like another workflow file or a container activity, step over executes that whole chunk in one go and pauses after it rather than diving inside it. Useful for skipping over parts you know are working fine.
Okay. Different levels of stepping through.
Right. There's also a slow step, usually Ctrl plus F11 toggles it, which lets you adjust the execution speed during debugging. You can make the robot run slower so you can visually follow its actions on the screen more easily. And debugging options let you configure things like whether UI elements should be highlighted on screen as the robot interacts with them. All these tools together let you follow the flow, see the data change, and pinpoint where the logic goes wrong or where the interaction with an application fails.
That sounds like a comprehensive toolkit for troubleshooting. Now, beyond just building the steps, designing smart workflows is crucial for creating robust and maintainable automations. How does UiPath help you create these workflows visually, especially considering different types of process logic? You mentioned sequences earlier.
Right. UiPath really emphasizes automated workflow design, making it accessible even without deep programming knowledge. It offers 3 main layout diagrams, each suited for different kinds of process structures. We use the sequence in our simple greeting example. It's straightforward, linear, flowing directly from top to bottom. Best for simple sequential tasks where you don't have many decisions.
Okay, linear flow, sequence. What else?
Then you have the flow chart. This is much more graphical and two-dimensional. It's excellent for showcasing decision points and branching paths in your logic, using diamond shapes for decisions and arrows to show the flow. It gives you a really clear visual overview of more complex processes with multiple conditions.
More like a traditional process map.
Exactly like a traditional process map. And finally, there's the state machine. This is generally used for more complex, often transactional business processes where the automation can be in various states and transitions between these states based on specific conditions or events. Think of things like processing an insurance claim, which might go through states like received, under review, approved, rejected, payment processed. It's a more advanced structure, but very powerful for certain types of long-running or event-driven automations.
So you choose the layout that best fits the logic of the process you're automating.
Precisely. You pick the structure that makes the logic clearest and easiest to manage.
And within these layouts, especially flowcharts and state machines, how do the robots actually make decisions? How do they react differently based on conditions or data? What types of decision activities can you build into a workflow?
Good question. UiPath provides several activities specifically for handling decisions. The most common and basic one is the if activity. You use this within a sequence typically. It evaluates a condition, like custom merge 18. If the condition is true, the activities you place in the then section are executed. If it's false, the activities in the optional else section are executed. It's your standard if-then-else logic, perfect for simple two-way branches.
Okay, simple true-false split.
Right. Then, for situations where you have multiple possible choices based on the value of a single expression, you'd use the switch activity. You provide an expression, like invoice type, and then define different cases for the possible values: standard, urgent, credit note. The robot executes only the block of activities matching the value of the expression. This is super useful for streamlining what might otherwise be a messy cascade of nested if activities, or for categorizing data like storing different types of incoming documents into different folders.
So like a multi-way branch based on one value.
Exactly. Now, if you're working visually within a flowchart layout, you don't use the if activity directly. Instead, you use a flow decision node. It looks like a diamond shape in the flowchart. It works conceptually just like the if activity. It has one incoming connection and typically two outgoing connections labeled true and false based on a condition you set.
So the flowchart equivalent of if.
Pretty much. And similarly, there's a flow switch node for flowcharts, which acts like the switch activity, allowing you to split the control flow into 3 or more branches based on the value of an expression. It helps keep complex branching logic clean and visual within the flowchart structure.
That makes sense. Different tools for different contexts, but covering the basic decision patterns. Now, with potentially complex workflows using sequences, flowcharts, decisions, and lots of activities, I imagine keeping things organized and understandable becomes really important, especially if multiple people work on a project. How critical are naming conventions?
Oh, extremely important. You hit on a key point for maintainability and collaboration. Using clear, consistent naming conventions for your variables, arguments, activities, and even your workflow files significantly reduces the effort required for anyone, including your future self, to read, understand, and maintain the automation project.
What are some recommended practices?
Generally, for variables, it's recommended to use upper camel case, also known as Pascal case, like first name or invoice total. For arguments, which we'll discuss next, they pass data between workflows. It's common to use the same upper camel case, but add a prefix indicating the direction, like in-file name for an input argument or out customer data for an output argument.
Okay, that prefix helps understand data flow.
Exactly. For activities, the name should clearly reflect the action being taken and maybe the UI element involved. Instead of the default click, rename it to something specific like click the submit button or type username into login field. And for the workflow files themselves, the .xaml files, use a name that describes the work being done, often starting with a verb like getTransactionData.xaml or processinvoice.xaml. Consistency across a team is key here.
That level of detail really seems essential for building anything beyond a trivial automation. So we've talked a lot about data moving around and making decisions based on it.
Yeah.
Let's dive into how UiPath handles the data itself. You mentioned variables and arguments. Can you explain these core building blocks for data handling? What exactly is a variable in UiPath?
Think of it this way. A variable is like a temporary storage box or a sticky note that a robot uses for its current task within a single workflow file. For example, it might need to remember a customer's ID number while it's processing their order.
A temporary placeholder.
Exactly. It holds a value that can change as the automation runs, hence variable. In UiPath Studio, variables can store many different types of data: simple text like a name, numbers like a price, entire tables of data like results from an Excel sheet, specific time date values, true-false values, booleans, and even more complex data structures.
How do you create and manage them?
You typically define them using the variable panel, which is usually at the bottom of the Studio screen. For each variable, you need to give it a unique name, following those conventions we just discussed. Specify its variable type, like string, int32, data table, boolean. Define its scope, which part of the workflow the variable is accessible in, example, just within a specific sequence, or the entire workflow. And you can optionally give it a default value.
Scope sounds important for keeping things tidy.
Very important, yes. Limiting the scope helps prevent accidental modifications and makes the workflow easier to understand.
Okay, so variables are for holding data within a workflow. What are arguments then, and how are they different? You mentioned them briefly with naming conventions.
Right. An argument is similar to a variable in that it holds data, but its specific purpose is different. Think of an argument as a formal way to pass data between different workflow files. If you break your automation into smaller, reusable .xaml files, which is good practice for complexity, arguments are the channels you use to send information into those files when you call them and get results out of them when they finish.
So variables are internal storage. Arguments are for communication between workflows.
That's the key difference, exactly. Variables pass data between activities within a single workflow file. Arguments pass data between workflow files. They're crucial for building modular, reusable, and maintainable automations. You might have one workflow that gets customer data, and it passes that data via an out argument to another workflow that generates an invoice using that data, which it receives as an in argument.
And you mentioned arguments have different directions, in, out.
Yes, that's critical. Each argument must have a specified direction. In, data flows into the workflow from the outside, from the workflow that called it. Out, data flows out of the workflow, back to the workflow that called it. The workflow assigns a value to the out argument before it finishes. In, out. Data flows both ways. The workflow receives an initial value, can modify it, and the modified value is passed back out.
Okay, that defines how the data moves between these reusable pieces. Very useful. Let's switch gears slightly to another incredibly powerful and potentially huge time-saving feature, recording your actions. This sounds almost magical, like it could capture practically anything you do on screen and just turn it into an automation.
It's definitely a huge time saver, especially when you're starting out or dealing with processes that involve lots of simple UI interactions. Recording basically watching your actions on screen clicks, typing, selecting things, and automatically translates those actions into a sequence of activities in UiPath Studio. It can really accelerate the development of automating many business processes.
So it builds the basic workflow for you.
It builds the skeleton, yes. It's a fantastic way to quickly get a framework for your automation. However, it's important to understand its limitations. It's not perfect, and some actions are generally non-recordable.
Like what? What doesn't it usually capture?
Things like pressing keyboard shortcuts, like Strl plus C, performing right-clicks on elements, complex mouse actions like hovering to make a menu appear, or pressing modifier keys like Shift or Ctrl while clicking. You'll almost always need to go back and manually add or tweak the recorded sequence, adding logic, error handling, and those non-recordable actions.
So it's a starting point, not a finished product.
An excellent starting point, but rarely the complete finished product for a robust automation.
Okay. What are the different types of recording available in UiPath? Are there different modes for different situations?
Yes. UiPath offers several recording profiles, each tailored for different types of applications or automation needs. The main ones are basic recording. This is the simplest. It's generally suitable for automating single activities and generates very detailed selectors for each action. The downside is it doesn't usually create containers, which can make the automation run a bit slower. Desktop recording. This is more versatile and generally recommended for automating all types of desktop applications, especially those involving multiple actions. It's smarter, it usually generates containers, like an attached window activity, that group actions performed within the same window, which typically results in faster and more reliable automation.
Okay, desktop sounds like the go-to for standard Windows apps.
Often, yes. Then there's web recording. As the name suggests, this is specifically optimized for automating interactions within web browsers, like Chrome, Edge, Firefox. It also generates containers and selectors suited for HTML elements, making web automation generally faster and more reliable than using basic recording.
Makes sense. And what about tricky environments, like virtual machines?
For those, you have Citrix recording, or more broadly, image-based automation recording. This is designed for virtualized environments like Citrix XenApp, VNC, remote desktops, virtual machines, where UiPath might not be able to directly access the UI element's underlying code. In these cases, the recorder relies more on identifying elements based on their appearance, image recognition, or their position on the screen, and automating keyboard inputs and mouse clicks based on coordinates or images. It requires more care during recording and is often more brittle if the screen resolution or appearance changes.
So different tools for different technical challenges. When you use these recorders, what kind of activities does UiPath automatically generate for you in the studio workflow?
It intelligently generates the corresponding activities based on your actions. If you click a button or a link, it generates a click activity. If you type text into a field, it generates a type into activity and often hides the password if it detects a password field. If you check a radio button or a checkbox, it creates a check activity. If you select an item from a drop-down list, it generates a select item activity.
So it translates your actions into these building blocks.
Precisely. And often the recording toolbars themselves give you options while you're recording, like pausing, adding manual steps, or explicitly adding time delays between actions if needed.
You mentioned manual steps. Is there also a way to manually add recorded steps if the automatic recording misses something, or for those non-recordable actions?
Yes, absolutely. While the automatic recorders are great, sometimes you need more control. UiPath also provides manual recording capabilities. This usually involves indicating an action type first, like click or copy text, and then indicating the target element on the screen. This is essential for adding those actions the automatic recorders can't capture, like starting or stopping applications, handling specific mouse events like right clicks or double clicks, manipulating windows, maximize, minimize, close, or performing more fine-grained text or image-based actions. It complements the automatic recording features.
Okay, good to know you can mix and match automatic and manual steps. Another crucial aspect of many automations is extracting information from applications or documents. UiPath seems to offer two primary methods here that sound similar but are distinct: data scraping and screen scraping. What's the core difference between those two?
That's a common point of confusion, but the difference is key. Data scraping is specifically designed for extracting structured data. Think of data organized neatly in tables or lists, like product listings on an e-commerce site, search results, or data in a spreadsheet-like format within an application.
So, repeating patterns of data.
Exactly, structured repeating patterns. UiPath provides a helpful graphical wizard for this, called the data scraping wizard, or sometimes table extraction. It guides you through the process. You typically indicate the first element in the table and then the last element, and UiPath intelligently figures out the pattern to extract all the rows and columns in between. You can customize column headers, set the maximum number of results, and even configure it to automatically click Next buttons to scrape data across multiple pages. The output is usually a data-able variable, perfect for writing to Excel or a database.
Okay, so data scraping is for structured tables and lists. What about screen scraping then?
Screen scraping, on the other hand, is generally used for extracting text from a specific UI element or region of the screen, which might not be structured in a table format. Think about grabbing the text from a specific paragraph on a web page, an error message in a pop-up window, the contents of a specific field in a desktop application, or even text directly from a document like a PDF or an image.
So more targeted text extraction from anywhere on the screen.
Exactly. When you use the screen scraping tool in UiPath, it tries to identify the target element and then offers you different methods to extract the text. UiPath will often automatically choose a method it thinks is best, like native method for apps built with compatible technologies, full text method, which grabs all visible text, including hidden info sometimes, or OCR, optical character recognition, for extracting text from images or virtual environments.
And you can choose the method, like OCR.
Yes, you can override the automatic choice and select the scraping method yourself. The native method often gives you options like preserving formatting or getting word coordinates. Full text might have an option to ignore hidden text. And if you choose an OCR engine like the built-in Tesseract or integrations with Google or Microsoft OCR, you get options related to language, scaling the image for better accuracy, inverting colors for different backgrounds, specifying allowed character sets like only numbers, and also getting word coordinates.
So screen scraping is more flexible for unstructured text and uses different underlying techniques.
Precisely. Both data scraping and screen scraping will generate activity sequences and necessary container activities like attach window or attach browser in your workflow on the Designer tab when you use their respective wizards.
Okay, that clarifies the scraping techniques. Now, to really put all of this together and make it concrete, let's explore some detailed automation examples using UiPath for common business tasks. How could it automate tasks in, say, Microsoft Excel that's ubiquitous in business?
Absolutely. Excel automation is one of the most common use cases for RPA. UiPath has a rich set of activities specifically for Excel. You usually need to make sure the uipath.excel.activities package is installed in your project. A typical example might look like this. 1. You'd use an Excel application scope activity to tell UiPath which Excel file to open or work with. 2. Inside that scope, you could use a read range activity to read data from a specific sheet and range, e.g. sheet 1, range A1.C10, or even the entire sheet. This activity reads the data and stores it neatly into a datable variable we discussed earlier. Let's call it Excel data. 2. Inside that scope, you could use a read range activity to read data from a specific sheet and range. For example, sheet 1, range A1 to 3. Then you could use a read for each row activity to loop through each row in that Excel data table. 2. Inside that scope, you could use a read range activity to read data from a specific sheet and range. For example, sheet 1, range A1.4. Inside the loop, for each row, you could access specific cell values. Example, row column name .toString or row 0 .toString for the first column. And maybe use a write line activity to print it to the output panel, or perhaps use a type into activity to enter that data into another application, or even use a write cell activity to write some calculated result back into another column in the same Excel file. Inside that scope, you could use a read range activity to read data from a specific sheet and range. Example, sheet 1, range A1.5. Finally, the Excel application scope would close the file, optionally saving changes.
So it can read, process, and write back to Excel pretty easily.
Very easily, yes, without even needing Excel to be visually open on the screen sometimes, depending on the activity settings.
What about extracting information from PDF files? That can be a real headache manually, especially if they're scanned documents.
Another very common and valuable use case. Again, UiPath has dedicated PDF activities. Ensure the UiPath.pdf activities package is installed. For a standard digitally created PDF where the text is selectable, you can use the read PDF text activity. You just point it to the PDF file, and it extracts all the text into a string variable.
Okay, for good PDFs, what about scanned ones or image-based PDFs?
For those where the text isn't directly selectable because it's just an image of text, you'd use the read PDF with OCR activity. This activity uses an OCR engine. You choose which one, Tesseract, Google, Microsoft, Abbey, etc., to read the text from the images within the PDF pages. The quality of the result depends heavily on the quality of the scan and the OCR engine used, but it allows you to extract data even from image-based PDFs.
That's powerful. And once the text is extracted,
Once you have the text in a string variable from either read PDF text or read PDF with OCR, you can then process it. You might use string manipulation functions to find specific pieces of information like an invoice number or a date, use regular expressions for more complex pattern matching, save the extracted text to a .txt file using a write text file activity, or display it on screen using a message box.
so it turns unstructured PDF content into usable text data. Fantastic. And one last common example. What about something as everyday and often time-consuming as managing emails? How can UiPath automate email tasks?
Email automation is another huge area for RPA. Using the Mail Activities package, UiPath.mail.activities, you can interact with various email platforms like Outlook, Gmail, Exchange, IMP SMTP servers. A practical example could be automatically processing incoming invoices received via email.
How would that work?
You could use the Get Outlook Mail Messages activity if using Outlook Desktop, or Get IMEP Mail Messages for servers like Gmail. You configure it to connect to the specific account and folder, e.g. inbox, and you can add filters like only getting unread messages or only emails from a specific sender or with a specific subject line keyword like invoice. Let's say you tell it to get the top 5 unread emails matching your criteria.
Okay, it fetches the relevant emails.
Right. The activity outputs a list of mail message objects. You'd then typically use a for each loop to iterate through this list of emails. Inside the loop, for each email message, you could perform actions like displaying the subject, mailmessage.subject, or sender, mailmessage.from.address, in a message box or log, checking if the email has attachments, mailmessage.attachments.inep. If it has attachments, using a Save Attachments activity to download them to a specific folder, extracting the email body text, mailmessage.body, for further processing, moving the processed email to another folder using a Move Outlook Mail Message or Move IMP Mail Message activity.
So it can read, filter, download attachments, extract info, and organize emails automatically.
Absolutely. It's a massive time saver for anyone dealing with high volumes of rule-based email processing.
Wow. Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground. We've just navigated a really comprehensive and, I think, practical journey through robotic process automation with a really deep dive into UiPath's impressive capabilities.
Yeah, we really went from the basics, understanding what a robot truly means in this RPA context, all the way through the nuances of workflow design, debugging, and those specific real-world applications like automating Excel, PDF, and email tasks. Hopefully everyone listening feels like they now have a pretty powerful foundational understanding.
I think so. And it's important to remember this isn't just about, the technical nuts and bolts. It's really about understanding a technology that's actively reshaping industries right now, making processes much more efficient, and fundamentally changing how people and businesses interact with digital systems. You've hopefully gained a true shortcut to being well-informed about a really crucial aspect of our evolving digital landscape.
Absolutely. And it leads to some interesting thoughts about the future, doesn't it? So maybe a final thought for our listeners to mull over. Given that RPA focuses so much on imitating human actions on a computer and its increasing ability to integrate with more advanced AI, what new kinds of virtual coworkers or digital assistants do you envision emerging in the next decade? And how might that fundamentally change the way we all approach work and collaboration day to day?
Virtual coworkers. That's definitely something to think about.